This coverage is brought to you by JJL Groundworks Limited, civil engineers and infrastructure specialists.
Welcome to Scottish Rugby Television, where regularly we'll be bringing you the very best in Scottish club rugby. We're starting off with a game today here at Millbrae in Premier 1 between Ayr and Melrose, which promises to be an absolute cracker. Ayr are 5th in the table, Melrose are 6th. They couldn't be any closer. It could be that close on the park. And early on it was Ayr who applied all the pressure. AJ McFarlane pinching the ball at the back of a retreating Melrose scrum there. Ayr pack piling in, and well, Melrose were having to defend awful close to their own line early on in the game. The ball worked out. Damien Kelly in the centre there. Wee pop pass to Nick Lavelle, back for his first game after injury, celebrating after only 2 minutes with a try that took Ayr ahead. That one looked awful simple, and 7 minutes later, Ayr stretched that lead. Good line out take there by Scott Sutherland. The ball worked out into midfield. Now was Paul Butt busting through, taking 2 or 3 tacklers with him. Ball laid back again, and this time when it got to Lavelle, that tackle came from a man who just had to be offside, said referee Ian Ramage, and it couldn't have been an easier kick for Ben Colley, which took Ayr into an 8-0 lead after only 8 minutes. They stayed up with the clock as well, because with 13 minutes gone, lovely wee break there by Ryan Holland, taken out by Ross Miller, and the ball coming inside. Worked out again there by AJ McFarlane, with Scott Sutherland taking it into the heart of the Melrose defence. Worked out Richard McCallum to Nick Lavelle, Lavelle to Paul Butt, who is covering every blade of the Millbrae park. And McFarlane, well, that was a penalty, said Ian Ramage, but very cleverly playing advantage. Ben Colley working the ball back. McFarlane in there again, taken on by Ewan Logan. And Scott White having to get in to do a bit of defending for Melrose. Out to Lavelle and spinning out of a couple of tackles. The centre over for his second try, and they're up with the clock, 13 points ahead after only 13 minutes. 25 minutes gone, and Melrose came back into the game. Glenn Tippett, fantastic drive off the back of the Ayr scrum there, but Ayr turned over and the ball was worked out, and Craig Edwards having a wee go at the defence there, trying to, Scott McCormick trying to take the quick one. Ball knocked out of his hands by Richard McCallum, and Ian Ramage said, no, I think you just earned yourself a 10-minute rest in the bin. Scott White had no problem right in front of the post, popped it over. Melrose on the board, 13 points to 3, but the margin was restored just 4 minutes later. Ayr again putting on the pressure. Melrose worked the ball out into midfield, really not going anywhere, holding on to the ball in their frustration at not unpicking that Ayr defence. And this was a much longer one for Ben Colley, all of 42 metres. Gave it a lot of height, and he gave it the length. Up go the flags, and Ayr back into a 16 points to 3 lead. But they still had 14 men, but you wouldn't think it the way they got this drive going against Melrose pack that was just beginning to fray at the edges a wee bit. The Ayr forwards driving on. AJ McFarlane just directing them, telling them where to put the effort in. Stuart Johnson bobbing around at the back of the Melrose scrum, trying to make sure that nobody gets through, and Lavelle taking the ball into White. White putting the tackle in, but AJ McFarlane having to do a wee bit of agricultural work there to release that ball. Out it came, slipped through Graham Dodd's tackle, and the scrum half was over for the try. Ayr had to work very, very hard for that one. And then in the final minute of the half, after Colley had slotted that conversion, Ayr picked up another penalty. After a wee fracas between Nick Lavelle and Graham Dodds, led to yellow cards. Ayr got the penalty. Colley made no mistake, and Ayr went into half-time 26 points to 3 ahead.
This coverage is brought to you by JJL Groundworks Limited, civil engineers and infrastructure specialists.
Into the second half, and Melrose now with the wind behind them and the rain pouring down on Millbrae might be the sort of thing that would give them that wee bit of an advantage. Certainly that break by Scott White showed that Melrose were not out of it yet, and piling in there, backs and forwards all working together. Kieran Miles taking a long run to get in there. Ball worked out now by Scott McCormick. And Callum Anderson tackled, keeping the ball alive. Ball worked out again to Anderson. Has a wee look, a wee shimmy, and whoops, there's a big hole in the Ayr defence, and he was straight through it. Super try by the young Melrose winger. And, well, it was pretty close to the post and not the sort of kick that Scott White was going to miss. But that was it for Melrose. We went through the whole of the rest of the half without a score going on the board. Ayr forcing the Melrose players onto the back foot often enough to keep danger away from their line. And finally, with the game just entering injury time, a big drive by the Ayr forwards. Ewan Logan raises a fist, so does Nick Lavelle. Ian Ramage raises his arm to indicate that Paul Burke has clinched the bonus for Ayr. Ben Colley slotted the conversion, and that looked like it was all over. But no, this isn't an action replay. This is 3 minutes into injury time. Ayr in exactly the same position and doing exactly the same thing to a Melrose defence that really by now had completely run out of gas. They're all over the line. Who comes up with it? 19-year-old hooker Pat MacArthur. What a finish for him in a game which Ayr have dominated from start to finish. And as Ben Colley's conversion went over, that's a final score at Millbrae's. Ayr 40, Melrose 10.
Craig, a win's always good, but a win over your old club, that must have made it all the sweeter today.
Oh, it does, and it's actually to be able to enjoy the last 5 or 6 minutes was great. It was magic. We played really well in the first half. We took a couple of good scores, and we kicked our points with Ben. And in the last 5 minutes, we should have probably done that 15-20 minutes earlier to be winning quite comfortably. But no, 40 points to 10. Somebody said that to me before the game started. I'd have been over the moon, and another 5 points, which is magic, which keeps us at the right end of the table, and the progression is going well.
And that is a scoreline that will bring a smile to the faces of sponsors JJL Groundworks. This is Ron Evans for Scottish Rugby Television at Millbrae.
This coverage is brought to you by JJL Groundworks Limited, civil engineers and infrastructure specialists.